All right, well, now that we've learned the chords that we're going to be soloing over, I think it's a good idea to take a look at some of the scales we can use when soloing over these chords. That way you'll understand where the notes are coming from when learning these licks. This is a blues in C minor, so the C minor scale is a very good choice all the way up until the last two bars. Things get a little tricky during the last two bars. But here's a C minor scale. There's lots of places to play this, but here's the most common. I'm starting off on the 8th fret of the low E string. That note is C. I'll play 8, 10, 11 on that low E string. 8, 10, 11 on the A string. 8 to 10 on the D string. 7, 8, 10 on the G string, so we have to shift back here. Now move back into position. 8, 9, 11 on the B string. 8, 10, 11 on the high E string. So here's what we've just played. So that's the C minor scale. It can also be called the C natural minor scale, or it could also be called the C Aeolian mode. Different names, same scale. The minor pentatonic also works great throughout this. Here's C minor pentatonic. So here we're playing 5 notes. We're starting off on the 8th fret of the low E string, that's C, and then we'll play to the 11th fret on the low E, followed by 8 to 10 on the A string, 8 to 10 on the D string, 8 to 10 on the G, 8 to 11 on the top 2 strings. Now, if we add the flat 5 to this scale, we get what is known as the blues scale. So this is minor pentatonic with the flatted 5th. In this case, we're going to add a G flat note to the scale. So here we'll play 8 to 11 on the low E string, 8, 9, 10 on the A string, 8 to 10 on the D string, 8, 10, 11 on the G, and then 8 to 11 on the top 2 strings. Over the C minor chord, we can use another C minor scale known as the Dorian scale. This, however, does not work over the F minor chord. This works only over the C minor chord, so you have to be kind of careful here. But here's C Dorian. So here I'm playing 8, 10, 11 on the low E string, 8 to 10 on the A string, shift back now, play 7, 8, 10 on the D string, same thing on the G string, 7, 8, 10. Shift back into position, 8, 10, 11 on the top 2 strings. Okay, so there's a C Dorian scale. C Dorian can work great over the C minor chord or even the G minor chord, but be careful, you would not want to use that over the F minor chord. Now let's take a look at the last 2 bars where things get a little trickier. The first chord of bar 11 is a C minor chord with E flat in the bass. All of the notes in this chord are contained in the C minor scale, so there's nothing new to worry about here. We can just play C minor over this chord. The next chord, however, is G7 with D in the bass. Here I like to use C harmonic minor. We have a B natural note in the chord. So here's a C minor scale with B natural. The scale is called C harmonic minor. So let's go over that. Playing C on the 8th fret of the low E string, followed by 10, 11 on the low E string. Then I'll play the same thing, 8, 10, 11 on the A string. Jump to the 9th fret of the D string, and then the root note C on the 10th fret of the D string. Once again. Now if we continue this on the G string, I can play 7, 8, 10. On the B string, 8, 9. And then 7, 8 on the high E string. We can also continue upwards to play 10, 11 on the high E string. So the whole scale would sound like this. And that works great over the G7 chord with the D in the bass. The third chord in the 11th bar is C minor. So we can just think the key of C minor right there, play a C minor scale. And the next chord is E flat 7. Once again, now we have some notes that are outside of the C minor scale. A good approach is to play chord tones. Playing chord tones involves knowing arpeggio. So here's one way to play an E flat 7 arpeggio. If you play any of these notes, this will sound very melodic over this E flat 7 chord. When playing chord tones, you can't play a bad note. So here's E flat 7. So this arpeggio will start on the 11th fret of the low E string, that's an E flat note, followed by 10 to 13 on the A string, 11 to 13 on the D string, 12 on the G, 11, 14 on the B, 11, 15 on the high E. Any of those notes will sound great over the E flat 7 chord. Now, theoretically, the safest scale to play whenever you have a dominant chord, in this case E flat 7 is a dominant chord, the safest scale to play is what's known as mixolydian. So here's one pattern of E flat mixolydian. So here I'm starting off on E flat, 11th fret on the low E, playing 11 to 13, followed by 10, 11, 13 on the A string. Same thing on the D string, 10, 11, 13. On the G string, 10, 12, 13. Followed by 11, 13, 14 on the B string. 11, 13, 15 on the high E string. So here's what we've just done. And that's a mixolydian scale. That sounds great over any dominant chord. Following the E flat 7 chord, we're now up to bar number 12, where we'll play D7 followed by D flat major 7. For the D7 chord, we can use all the ideas that we just talked about for the E flat 7 chord, but move them down a half step. So we can play any of the notes from a D7 arpeggio. Or we can use notes from the D mixolydian scale. Or, since we're playing a blues in C, we have one note that we can really focus on, and that is F sharp. And that is the blues note in the key of C. So if we play the C blues scale, this should sound quite all right over the D7 chord. Sounds kind of funny when we just compare the scale with the chord, but in the context of the whole chord progression, I think that works quite well. The final chord is D flat major 7. So one thing we can do is play a D flat major 7 arpeggio. This will be the most melodic notes of the chord. So here's one way to play D flat major 7. So here I'm playing on the 9th fret of the low E string, 8 to 11 on the A string, 10 to 11 on the D, G string 10th fret, B string 9th fret, 8 to 9 on the high E string. Here's what we did once again. Now, if we want to talk about scales, a scale that works great over a major 7 chord is what's known as Lydian. So we can play a D-flat Lydian scale over this chord. And without drowning you in the theory of it, D-flat Lydian is the same as C Phrygian, if you'd like to compare it to the root note C, the root note of our song. But at any rate, here's one pattern of a D-flat Lydian scale. So here I'm going to play 9 to 11 on the low E string, 8, 10, 11 on the A string, 8, 10, 11 on the D, 8 to 10 on the G, 8, 9, 11 on the top 2 strings. All right, so there's a D-flat Lydian scale. Now, if all of these scales are a little bit overwhelming, the thing I would recommend doing is learning the arpeggios. When playing one of the notes from the arpeggios, you cannot go wrong. They're the most melodic, strongest notes you can play over a chord. So start there and see where that leads you. That's a lot of what I'm doing when playing these licks over the last 2 bars.